Shalom. I want to give all praises and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Rakakadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the members of the true from through the spirit of power of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Yahweh, the true name of the God of Israel, Yahushai, which is the word ignorantly called Jesus Christ, which is one of the true names of Yahushai, and pretty much building off what the last video I did. You know, there's no such thing as hell. As the scriptures say, all go but into one place. All right? It doesn't matter what your nationality was, it doesn't matter what your culture was, it doesn't matter the language you speak, your genetics, your phenotype, all spirits go into the one place. And they all go through that cycle of reincarnation, and they're regenerated in the flesh through the seed of their fathers. All right? So when you read in the scriptures, there's no account where it says that, oh, you know, you don't accept Roman Catholicism or you don't accept Christianity or one of the Christian denominations, you know, Satan is going to be there with a pitchfork, or, or Hades, the Greek god, is going to be there. Because, I mean, which one is it? Is it going to be Hades? Is it talking about the same person? And how do you know that that's what's going on if that's not in the scriptures? So, regardless, it's an invention of function. And I'm going to read this account of King Saul, you know, on his way, pretty much getting ready to get put to death for like a war for something because he didn't listen. And he went to a medium, he went to a witch to try to conjure up or summon Samuel. And Samuel, he was at rest. All right. So let's read it. Because when you die, you are rest. You don't hear the voice of the oppressor. You're not being afflicted, right? You don't worry about earthly things. This is on 1 Samuel 28:1. And as you can see the headline, it says soul in the spirit medium, which that's against the law, statutes, and commandments to be doing that. In the NLT, it says soul consorts a medium, right? Now, what was soul a violation of? Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 through 12. I'm going to read the AHDAWAM. It says, warns the Israelites, which the Israelites are some of the so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native American Indians. We are the seed of the promise. We make up the 12 tribes of Israel. It says, warns the Israelites entering the promised land against adopting the detestable practices of the nations, right? The 17 heathen nations there. It says specifically forbidding child sacrifice. This is where the hell doctrine origin comes from. The Israelites was in the valley of Hinnom. We read about that in Jeremiah 7, and they were sacrificing their children. Modern day Molech worship and child sacrifice as well. Planned Parenthood. It says passing children through fire, divination, soothsaying, sorcery, witchcraft, casting spells, consulting mediums. So this is what the chapter is going into. You're not supposed to be an Israelite consulting mediums. It says spiritists or the dead, because these acts are an abomination to Yahweh and were the reason Yahweh drove out those nations. This passage emphasizes a call to holiness, contrasting pagan occult practices with seeking the Most High through his appointed prophets, as discussed in the broader context of Deuteronomy chapter 18. It says, here's a breakdown of the specific forbidding practices: child sacrifice. Anyone who sacrifices the son or daughter in the fire. It says divination / fortune telling. Practicing divination, telling fortunes, interpreting omens, or sorcery. It says witchcraft / spells, engaging in witchcraft, casting spells, or charming. It says spiritism, assaulting mediums. So this is what Saul was guilty of. All right. Not only he didn't listen to the Most High to kill that specific Edomite, I always forget his name, but went to a witch, he went to a medium. It says spiritist or inquiring of the dead. And that's what he did because by that time, Samuel was already dead in the spirit world. He was at rest. When you die, you at rest. When you listen to these near-death experience videos, people talk about, oh, this warm feeling, right? And they always talk about how their body was like traveling up. That's the same context in the scriptures, all right? You at rest. It says, or inquiring of the dead, necromancy. So we're not supposed to be practicing on necromancy. All right, you use a Ouija board trying to conjure up the dead. We ain't supposed to be doing shit like that. It says, key message, Yahweh commands Israel to remain distant from the surrounding cultures by avoiding these occult and adulterous acts, which are deeply offensive to him and led to the downfall of other nations. Right? That led to our downfall. That's why we go through the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28, but we was following the way of the heathen. So let's actually read it. It's Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 9. And as you can see, it says spiritism forbidden. It says Deuteronomy 18 and 9 on down. When thou art come into the land, right, the promised land of Israel, that was only given to the seed of the promise, which is the Israelites, right? When you read in Genesis 15, that land was given unto us. The heathens, they don't have any inheritance with the promised land of Israel. It says, when thou come into the land which Yahweh thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn, meaning don't practice these customs. Learn to do after the abominations of those nations. Right? I'm reading the KJV, then I'm reading the NLT. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire. That's there you go. This is where the origins of hell come from. When the Israelites were sacrificing their children in the valley of Hinnom, right? It says through the fire, or that using divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consultant with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto Yahweh. And because of these abominations, Yahweh thy God will drive them out from before thee. So the Most High, He don't want us to be keeping the customs and practices of the heathen nations. He don't want us to be like them. That's why He gave us the law, statutes, and commandments. We read Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, to separate and elevate us above the nations, to make us different. All right? Reading the NLT, Deuteronomy 18 and 9. It says, NLT, it says, when you enter the land Yahweh your God is giving you, be very careful not to imitate the detestable customs of the nations living there, like them Canaanite tribes, right? That you read about in Deuteronomy 7. It says, for an example, never sacrifice your son or daughter as a burnt offering, and do not let your people practice fortune telling, or use sorcery, or interpret omens, or engage in witchcraft. That's what Saul was guilty of. Or cast spells, or function as mediums, or psychics, or call forth the spirits of the dead. See, this is what Saul was guilty of. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. It is because the other nations have done these detestable things that Yahweh your God will drive them out ahead of you. So the heathen nations, look, when you read 2 Kings 17, the heathen nations, they can't keep the law, statutes, and commandments. They're not programmed to do that. They're always going to keep their idolatrous, fornication customs that go contrary to the law, statutes, and commandments. So now we know what Saul was guilty of, but let's read the act. 1 Samuel 28:1. It says, and it came to pass in those days, right, that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight with Israel. Because the Philistines, we used to border their land. So they used to try to invade our borders a lot. So we would have to go and protect our borders, right? When you look at a map of our inheritance back then, the Philistines, they will always invade our border to try to take our land. So we would have to defend it. And this is one of like our arch enemies outside of Amalek. All right. The first nation we went to war against was Amalek, which is the Edomites. Amalek was the grandson of Esau, the top tribe of the nation of Edom, which is the JEWS today. It says to fight with Israel, and Tish said unto David, know thou surely that thou go out with me to battle, thou and thy men. I just want to get to the point. Verse 3, it says, now Samuel is dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, even in his own city. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land. So keep this in mind, right? Verse 3, he put away those that had familiar spirits and wizards out of the land, right? And the Philistines gathered themselves together and came and pitched in Shunem, and Saul gathered all Israel together, and they pitched in Gilboa. And when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the law, now how do people inquire of the law, the Lord? When you read 1 Samuel 9, they have to go to a prophet. But in ancient times, they would go to seers. It says, and when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Uriam, nor by the prophets. So the Lord, he completely ignored Saul. He's not dealing with him. It says, then said Saul unto his servant, seek me a woman that have a familiar spirit. So keep this shit in mind. Verse 3, he kicked out, right? He put away those that have familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land, which that was a righteous thing to do, right? But then in verse 7, this dude backslides, and then he says, seek me a woman that have a familiar spirit. And he's going against what? Deuteronomy chapter 18. So witchcraft, sorcery, that stuff is real. The left hand practices, that stuff is real. Things you hear about in Hollywood, the blood sacrifices, those are all associated with the customs of worshiping another god, right? It says, seek me a woman that have a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. So our custom, when you read 1 Samuel 9 and 9, we only supposed to go to the prophets. The Lord said in Deuteronomy 18 that he will raise up a prophet from the seed of thy brethren. This dude was just doing wicked things. It says, and his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman that have a familiar spirit at Endor. Right? Let's read in the NLT, 1 Samuel 18 and 7. Saul then said to his advisors, find a woman who is a medium, so I can go and ask her what to do. His advisors replied, there is a medium at Endor. So I'm going to keep it going in the NLT. It says, so Saul disguised himself by wearing ordinary clothing. So this is a secret in there, because he's trying to disguise himself. He know he's not supposed to be doing that, according to the Lord's statutes and commandments. But because of his rebellion and him trying to force the Most High's hand, he's going to go to the switch of Endor. So Saul disguised himself by wearing ordinary clothing instead of his royal robes. Then he went to the woman's home at night. Everybody is asleep, but he could secretly go and inquire, right? Accompanied by two of his men. I have to talk to a man who has died, he said. Will you call up his spirit for me? So this is Saul talking to a witch, and he's disguised, right? Says, are you trying to get me killed? The woman demanded. You know that Saul has outlawed all the mediums. So this woman is not even aware that Saul is disguised and he's right in front of her. Going back to verse 3, because all the familiar spirits, people that practice any form of witchcraft and sorcery, he kicked them out the land when you read verse 3. So this is why she's speaking like this. She don't realize that it's Saul disguised right in front of her. And then T says, are you trying to get me killed? The woman demanded. You know that Saul has outlawed all the mediums and all who consult the spirits of the dead. Why are you setting a trap for me? But Saul took an oath in the name of Yahweh and promised. And now the scriptures say what? You shall not say the name Yahweh in vain. Right? So this is what he did. It says, as surely as Yahweh lives, nothing bad will happen to you for doing this. That's not true. It says, finally, the woman said, well, whose spirit do you want me to call up? And then it says, call up Samuel. Saul replied, it says, when the woman saw Samuel, she screamed, you deceive me, you are son. It says, don't be afraid. The king told her, what do you see? I see a God coming up out of the earth, she said. It says, what does he look like? Saul asked. He is an old man wrapped in a robe, she replied. Saul realized it was Samuel, and he fell to the ground before him. Why have you disturbed me by calling me back? Samuel, Samuel asked Saul. So this is the spirit of Samuel, because remember it said that he died when you read the first verse of the chapter. Right? So now this is Samuel, and obviously he got a conscience. All right, he's talking. He remember who Saul is. So he's saying, why you disturb me? Why you calling me back? It says Samuel asked Saul, because I am in deep trouble. Saul replied, the Philistines are at war with me, and the Most High has left me and won't reply by prophets or dreams. So I have called for you to tell me what to do. But Samuel replied, why ask me? Since Yahweh has left you and has become your enemy. The Lord has done just as he said he would. He has torn the kingdom from you and given it to your rival David. The Lord has done this to you today because you refused to carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites. Once more, the Lord will hand you and the army of Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons will be here with me, meaning that they're going to die tomorrow in the war. And so the Lord will bring down the entire army of Israel in defeat. Saul fell full on the ground. Well, he got the answer that he wanted, right? It says paralyzed with fright because of Samuel's words. He was also faint with hunger, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. When the woman saw how distraught he was, she said, sir, I obey your command at the risk of my life. Now do what I say and let me give you a little something to eat so you can regain your strength for the trip back. For Saul refused to eat anything. Then his advisors joined the woman and urged him to eat. So he finally yielded and got up from the ground and sat on the couch. I mean, so that's the point of the chapter. All right. You know, the point is that he consulted a medium. He went against the law. He already didn't listen to the Lord when he was supposed to kill that Amalekite king. I forget the dude's name, but he let the dude live. All right. So that's strike one. Strike two is him going to the witch of Endor. This dude is just, he's a rebellious king. He didn't listen. So that's pretty much it. And this proves that there's no such thing as hell. Shalom.